back to another episode of Conversations with Beloved and Kindred. My name is Dr. Grace Gipson, an assistant professor in the Department of African American Studies at Virginia Commonwealth University.
And I am Dr. Kanika Robinson in the Department of Africana Studies at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm a visiting professor.
All righty. All right, we got another one here for you all today. Today, we got the film Fast Colors, but before we dive in, Dr. Robinson has a couple of notes that she wants to make sure to go over.
First, I just want to go to the fact that we saw the Tina Turner documentary, which was what? Amazing.
Yes.
And okay, first of all, I love Tina Turner. Let's begin with that. And it really was a way for her to tell her story her way. Because, we all saw What's Love Got to Do with it. It's clearly a blasting. It's a definite blasting. And we were like, okay, well, that was great. We thought that told a great story. She was like, but that wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the book and I did the film for other people, but not for myself. And so this was a way for her to tell her story her way. So yeah, I was very excited about that. Okay. And what was another thing that came up out this documentary, and I don't want to take up too much time, was how she discussed this process of victimization.
Mm-hmm.
How she was trying to move past Ike Turner. And she was like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. This was during the time of What's Love Got to Do with It,
Right.
the movie and the book, when she came out with the book. And she would be interviewed and everyone would ask her about Ike,
Right.
even after she left him. And it was always about what Ike did to her versus what she had done. And I was like, that makes a good point because, this whole, we have this need to always know more about these famous people, but we're not conscious of what they are going through. We're not conscious of the fact that she was being re-victimized, even in our question, even in the film.
Yeah, it was, for her to be able to really tell her story, like you said, it was, this documentary was Tina, not Tina and Ike, not Tina and everyone else, but Tina. And for us to really get to know who she was, because although, yes, What's Love Got to Do with It is a classic, well, we really didn't get to know the ins and outs of who Tina Turner really is from Tina's voice and from Tina's point of view. So,
There was one thing missing, though.
You said what now?
There was one thing missing. What was it?
So Dr. Robinson has this love for a song, We Don't Need Another Hero from Tina Turner. And it is, I blame her for now. I have to listen to this song almost every day because of Dr. Robinson. And it was not included in the documentary. However, it is a great song, but for that's the only thing that, according to Dr. Robinson, doesn't make it perfect. But nonetheless, great, excellent film. I definitely think you should check it out. It's good for all ages.
Yeah.
Not just, because my mother is a huge Tina Turner fan. I'm a Tina Turner fan. I think there's some that even more. So I think it's just recommend for anyone and everyone that enjoys good music and that enjoys a good story that really gives you the truth. All the facts. Nothing is sugar coated. Nothing is hidden. So
It isn't. And it was, to me, I was interested. I didn't know all this about Tina. I did not know all this about Tina. I thought she was happy about, the movie coming out. So it was really good to, again, hear from a Black woman her story. We always like to tell a Black woman story, but why, this was the opportunity to say, let me share my own testimony.
Right.
Okay.
And speaking of Black woman stories, this movie is very much that, a several Black women and Black female and Black girl stories, very much combined into this one film. So what is that film? It is the 2018 film Fast Color.
Yes.
So
what did you think about the film before and afterwards? Like, what was before you saw the film, what did you think about it? We'll start there.
So initially, when I remember hearing about the film and when it first dropped, it was like, ooh, okay, because it was kind of labeled as this superhero kind of dystopian drama, and I was like, okay, that's intriguing and interesting. It's a good way to grab my attention because I'm all about Black female superheroes and knowing who is the main character, Gugu Mbatha-Raw. I hope I said her name right. and how I've seen her in various other films. So to kind of see her in this type of film, I was like, huh, because I've seen her in historical dramas. So seeing her in this kind of like sci-fi dystopian, I was like, okay. And it made me think of this TV series that was on Fox called The Stand, which includes the young girl who plays the young girl. And I was like, okay, this is really on some Octavia Butler, on some Parable of the Sower, all of that kind of like going back in time, tapping into one's power. So I was like, okay, you got me. So that was my initial thoughts before, going into the movie. And I'll wait till after we talk about it to say what my thoughts were afterwards, because I figured I don't want to like
Give it
give
away.
that away. So
Mhm.
but yeah, my initial thoughts were like, okay, I love the setting that a black female is the lead. And also the fact that Lorraine Toussaint was in the movie, and I'm a huge fan of her. Like, she is very much underutilized as an actress. So yeah.
That is true. Um, I when I well, I just saw it because you told me about it. I did not know anything about the film beforehand, but that's fine. When I got more information about it, I was, oh, and I can see how you're akin it to The Stand as well.
Hmm.
Because first of all, I love The Stand, the first one, and the new one we'll throw out there. So let's talk a bit about what this film is.
Yes.
Okay, so it's definitely this dystopian drama, right? We're even introduced to the film in the main character Ruth is just going through this barren area. It's just going through an abandoned building. There are rarely any people around. It is definitely like, what's going on in this world?
Yeah, it's empty.
Empty.
Hmm.
And then I remember Dr. Gipson, you bringing up this, like, when you first saw her going to the hotel and she asked for water and was like, what?
Because I'm like, why are you asking for water? Like, I'm not understanding the connection here. And we do further get connection on it, but I definitely was a little kind of like, why are you asking for, and why are we asking for different sizes of water? So,
Right, right. So that was that was the beginning. And so yes, we see this dystopian aspect of this film continues throughout.
right.
It actually helps the storyline, and we'll talk about the themes later as to why that's important.
uh Something else too that you mentioned, so like we hear this, the opening is kind of like of what maybe a poem or someone reading a journal. We hear a voice in the background, and then additionally we see someone like busting out of a very much abandoned building, and I'm like, so what just happened here, and who's after her? Is she escaping from something? It's unclear as
Right.
to what's happening, and what's going on. So
Because we see the ropes on her arm. And we're
yeah,
like, she must have been kidnapped.
right.
She's not kidnapped?
So immediately we're like, is she the victim? Is she escaping from someone? And if she's escaping, who are the people that had her tied up?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of questions right off the bat. Like in the first 5-10 minutes, we're immediately trying to understand what's going on. There's immediately like, you're gonna have to answer that question for me, because I'm not understanding it. I'm not.
Exactly.
Yeah, and even in its simplistic, flow, it was complex, and we say that because we had so many questions right out the gate. So
Immediately.
yeah.
Like, and again, there weren't really anyone around, so there wasn't much conversation.
Hmm.
And even throughout the entire story, it moves slow. It moves carefully, not necessarily slow, but it's not like action, action, action. And so at first you're like, oh, hurry up, blah, blah, blah. But then you come to find out this is what is necessary for Ruth's character to build.
Right.
She's searching for something. She is looking for something. And it ends up being home.
Right.
And she goes to these different places. She goes to a what is it, a cafe. She's
Right.
going to different places because she's searching for something. So it's
Yeah.
moving forward with understanding who she is.
Right. So there's understanding who she is, this finding oneself, finding like home, finding a place to settle. So because she's constantly moving. So it's very kind of vagabond, type of thing here where it's like, I'm in this place. Okay, now I'm going to move to this place. I got this place. So she doesn't stay in places long. So,
Right.
which you're wondering, like, why she don't want to stay here? Like, I remember at the hotel, the first hotel, the clerk asked her how long. She was like, one night.
And we're like, probably more than one night. We have nowhere to go.
But she didn't even say the one night. So, but the other thing too that we get very early in the beginning is that she's cognizant of those around her and what what we learn her abilities are, what she's capable of.
Mhm.
So even when things are happening, she is warning people. She's letting them know, like, you need to take cover, you need to protect yourself, you need to protect your child. So that she's not malicious. That she's not trying to harm anyone, and that she understands these abilities that she has. She can't quite control them.
She can't. That's why she's warning them. She's
Right.
like,
So
look,
she can control that. At least I can warn you.
right. And she knows when it's coming
Right.
because she starts to shake. But again, she doesn't have control over herself, which is part of her journey, her traveling and trying to find a place where she can get an understanding of who she is, and she can find solace. Because again, it goes back to you constantly looking for something, comfort or something. So yeah, it's huge to me.
And as we talk about the movie more now, I start to think, like, maybe this film is about finding who you are and really tapping into what you contribute to the world, what you contribute to your society, to your community, all of that. And that it doesn't necessarily have to be in this big, huge way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whatever you bring to the table, that's what you bring to the table. So,
And then to even capitalize off that or build on that, it's like, yes. So, sometimes we may get lost or whatever. It's like, just come home.
yeah,
Come back
yeah.
to yourself. Come home, start again. That was it.
Mhm.
So she was searching for a place to be when she really had to come home and try again.
Right. And she didn't want to come home. And I think we as Black people, we as Black women, we feel like we have to go out in the world and do what's right. And if we come back home, that's a sign of a failure. It's a sign of that we didn't do what we said we were going to do. But
Mm.
sometimes there's a little glitch, there's a little bump in the road. And it's not that, our parents or those who are watching over us or helping us are ashamed or
Right.
disappointed, because if anything, they want to help us. At least that's what we want to believe, that
Mhm.
they want to help us also. So when they say come home, it's not because they want to punish us. It's because they're like, hey, let's try this again. You
Mhm.
know, get your feet, get your footing together, as they say, and regroup, and
Mhm.
then let's start again. So yeah.
So we see that. Like you said, going back and looking at it, it's similar to that, where we sometimes just need to come back home. We need to come back home to get to understand who we are. Like, why are we this way? Let's go back to, this is who your mother is. This is who your grandmother is. Let's go back to family. You can leave again, but let's go back to who we are. So yeah, it was really good.
So we got kind of like, what the movie, how we would describe it. Then it's important that we, take a look at the setting and the location. So this some, we always got to do a little background research. So the film was taped and done in New Mexico, but as far as the movie goes, it was set in the Midwest.
Right.
So it works because, like, a lot of what you see in the Midwest is very similar to what is, seen in New Mexico. So we have a Midwestern town, and not Chicago Midwest, not, Indianapolis Midwest, but, I believe on the map it was kind of like Fargo, North Dakota type
Yeah,
Midwest.
it was random. Yeah.
So places where you're like, first off, are there Black people that exist in this space?
Right. Right. Right.
Because I don't know. But I mean, we everywhere, but are we everywhere? Even in the little small pockets? So,
Right.
and as someone who's from the Midwest, Champaign, Illinois, to be exact, I'm familiar with the cornfields. I'm familiar with the open fields of area where you're like, where's that next town? Or, when you get to the big city, you're like, oh, I made it. And so, yeah, so I got it how, and I appreciated the fact that this film was not in some big city, that
Right.
it was in a very kind of like secluded, town that not a lot of people were there. So it was able to really focus on the people, and the setting itself actually can actually become a character also.
Because even well, again, I'm not from the Midwest, Atlanta, Grady baby. Um, but even in that, the land for the road,
Right.
right? And so you need this barrenness that comes from being in the Midwest. It works to really understand. We'll talk about it later. The power of women in nature, the
Yes.
connection. So we needed that setting to see women in that role, and so we know one of the biggest aspects of the film is Black women.
Right.
It starts with a Black woman, it ends with a Black woman. It's about Black women coming together, and we see this through family.
Right. Before you get to that, I also want to make note that there's no technology. There's no that we see, like none of what we see as traditional technology. And I think that's important when we're thinking about dystopia, when we're thinking about barrenness, when we're thinking about openness, this idea that technology is not driving the story here. So I want to make sure we put that before we jump into family. Go ahead.
Okay, but no, that's definitely critical, because even the aspect of their family was about moving to this barren land. So all that work. So that was a huge thing. Family was a huge thing. So we'll speak about that several times in this podcast. So one thing is, when she finally, as she's on her road, she ends up at her mother's house.
Mm-hmm.
She ends up at her mother's house, and her mother is like, "You can't be here." But because of her, she has a supernatural ability, but again, she doesn't know how to control it because she doesn't really know it. And she causes earthquakes, and so she was nervous because there was a young person in the house.
Right.
But again, she's coming home because she's like, "I'm trying to get to know myself. I have no place to go.
Right.
I need to know how to deal with this. And I know you're nervous. If I come back, I'm going to shake up the world and cause earthquakes. But what else am I supposed to do? Can I come back?" And the mother, who is played by what's her name, Lorraine Toussaint.
Yep. Bo.
Her
Mm-hmm.
name Bo. Bo is like, "Okay, I'm still your mom. Go to the barn." And so it goes back to this whole idea of mothering. Like, I'm still your mother. It's
Right.
okay. Just go back there. So even this conversation of mothering,
Mm-hmm.
like, you can always come back. I may push you away to some degree and say, "Get out," but you can always come back.
Right.
And I'm here to inform you about who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that situation, we meet Ruth's baby,
Mm-hmm.
Lila.
Yep.
We find out about Lila, and it's like, "Oh wait, so this is your baby, Ruth, and you left the child?"
Right.
But she left her child for. I mean, it goes back to this conversation we had with Lovecraft, the leaving of the child.
Mm-hmm. And the sacrifices that we have to make for why we have to leave our children. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because it's not always, "Oh, I don't want to be with the child." It's for many reasons. And we'll find it out in the end, actually, like why she really ultimately had to leave, because her child was in danger. But again, she was coming back to find solace, but at the same time, she was coming back to be a mother,
Exactly.
to try to be a mother. And it took her mother to even help her become a mother.
Yep.
So it goes back to this transgenerational conversation that we have with each other, how mothers speak to mothers, how women speak to women in families.
Mm-hmm.
And mothering, again, does not necessarily mean having a child yourself. It does not mean biological. Mothering is just caring. But in this instance, of course, we talked about Ruth's mother, Bo. So it's like two generations: Bo, Ruth, and Lila. And you see knowledge being passed down throughout this whole film.
And I love that we're seeing this 3 generations of women who have talents and abilities, and you have the kind of matriarch Bo, who is all about nurturing these talents.
Yes.
And in that nurturing comes the mothering. In that mothering comes protecting.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be that, I know you're grown, but you're still my child. I still need to, cover you to make sure that the outside world doesn't get you. you know. So I really appreciated that kind of, you know, theme, and that, because that happened, that's, we're seeing that all the way through this idea of protecting, and what lengths people will go to protect, you know, their children, and that sometimes the sacrifices that Black mothers have to make is because in the end it's about protecting their children, and
Right.
what they have to do in the end, and how the sacrifices that they've made are only for what's best for their children. It's like I said, it's not out of selfishness, it's not out of pride. There may be some pride, but you know, it's definitely not out of, oh, I just don't want you anymore. It's like, no, 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 that's definitely not what it is. So
So that's the aspect you said. That's the aspect of mothering, protecting.
mhm,
And if that means you have to step away, then that's something you have to do.
exactly.
Um, and even though she had to leave again at one point, it was still like she had to come back. She couldn't leave.
Right.
It was multiple things. We were talking about escapism. But another aspect of that is their power. How she was able to understand her power through her mother and through her daughter, because her mother was mothering her daughter until she came back. So her daughter had this power, and the mother had this power. So this understanding of power was done at this moment when she came home, and everyone was able. She was able to learn how to wield her power, and
Yes.
she was able to understand it. Because part of that came through at the beginning. Bo was reading a book that her grandmother and everyone used to write in.
Yep.
They used to write in this book. And in that book was knowledge about who they are.
Right. Right.
But again, she had to come home to understand that.
Yep.
But in this, women are discovering their power. They're being empowered, like, we got this magic. But at the same time, they're told to keep the secret.
Yes.
It's like, you are great. You can move mountains, literally.
Yep.
You can, like, cause rain. You can see colors in the sky. But don't tell nobody, because people are always coming after us, as they were in the film.
Yep.
The scientist was coming after Ruth, and also Bo, technically, and Lila, once they find out that everyone has it. So these Black women had so much power to change the world, especially their situation around them, but they had to hide it. They were told to, hey, don't tell anyone, just run away. And then we even see it when Bo said we had to, her mother told her that no. Well, her mother told her to keep it secret, but they ended up having to move out of
Right.
the city.
So
So,
now I have to not only hide my ability and my talent, but then I have to also leave to make others feel comfortable.
right.
So because people are fearful of who you are and what you bring, you now have to, you know, shrink yourself, as we talked about with Hippolyta. So Ruth, Bo, Lila have to shrink themselves. They have to hide themselves to
Mhm.
protect themselves, and to essentially say, um, to be able to exist. That's what they had to do. Yeah.
Exactly, to just simply be able to exist. And Lila, she's like, I'm fixing up this truck so I can leave.
That
So,
was her escape.
love you lots, but just so you know, this truck, I'm not doing it for fun. I mean, it's fun, but there's a reason behind it. And her mother was like, that's cute. But then she did end up, it was like the mother didn't want her to go anywhere, but she ended up giving her the keys. Remember?
Yeah.
Like, why would you
It,
do that if you didn't? Anyway, like, why would you do that if you're like, okay, no? Because once she fixed up the truck, the mother was like, well, it's technically my truck and I have the keys. She thought was gonna be like, oh, she's not going anywhere. This like, you go enjoy your life. It was like,
maybe to see if she really would go, like, because you know how um we'll do things like, we know, like, someone told you what they're going to do, and you're like, I'm gonna see if they're actually gonna do it. So maybe this whole idea of, like, I had the keys, I'm gonna see if she really is gonna escape, because I'm actually giving her the power. And sometimes people, they'll have to think like, oh shoot, like this is actually really might happen. Maybe I shouldn't do it. So maybe it was a test. I don't know.
that
This
was a bad test. Like, she didn't know her daughter that well. That's what it was. She didn't know. She thought it was a joke. But she was so serious about fixing the truck, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But then this goes to the conversation of escapism we were talking about earlier. So Lila wanted to see what was out there. She was like, I want to leave this. Now, Lila, how old is Lila? She's not that old.
Lila's what? Maybe 10?
I would say 10. Let's go with 10.
10.
She
Let's go.
seems like 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but she wants to leave. Like,
Right.
I want to know what's out there. And even though the mother gave her keys, her mother ultimately said, you don't want to go out there.
Right.
The world isn't for you. And that is problematic because then she ended up abandoning her daughter that she just forged a new relationship with.
Right.
And but she's left again because she seriously still doesn't understand her magic. She left prematurely.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna leave keys up and I'm going to go away. But it goes back to, how should I say this? Like when you're lost, you feel the need to just run away when in fact you need to just come back home and go back to your rock, go back to your center.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. So I'm thinking also too about, this running away and how, what does that mean? Like, what are you running from? Why are you running? Um, you know, we think about, like, so we know definitely throughout, like, there's some other reasons why she left. It wasn't just simply because, like, I don't want to be here anymore. She
Mhm,
was definitely dealing with mental health. She was definitely dealing with drug addiction. She
mhm.
was definitely dealing with, something's happening to her and she doesn't understand it.
Right,
And different from what, Bo was doing with Lila, there wasn't a kind of like, let me help you cultivate this. At least we don't see that.
right,
I'm assuming that either it happened, there was resistance to that, or that it just wasn't happening at all. Whereas like Lila, we see Bo like, okay, you know what you can do with your talent.
she's like, yes, I do.
That's not we don't use our talents that way.
Mhm.
And Ruth is kind of like having to learn like Lila. Like, okay, this is what I can do. This is what I'm capable of. And how do I harness this? Because there's
Right.
a lot of talk about like harnessing, their powers and their abilities. And this was something I just thought of too. The fact that people are seen as outcasts when they have these abilities, and so I
Mhm.
think that may have also impacted Ruth leaving, is because the world might see her one way, and so you want to change how people see you because you have this you're different, and differences are not always necessarily looked at in a way that's like, oh yes, we welcome you, come.
Welcome home.
So yeah.
Instead, she was running, and even the same time she was running from scientists.
Right.
So it was like, in addition to me running, because I still don't understand why I'm causing earthquakes. Um, but I'm also running because my difference is not appreciated, but want to be experimented.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're not saying congrats on your abilities. We're saying how can we use it?
Right.
How can we take your power from you?
Yep. Yep.
How can we use your power so you can be disempowered? So
Mm-hmm.
while you feeling like an outcast for who you are, we're going to use the same thing for our benefit. It goes back to the recent conversations of what cultural appropriation. How
Right.
we're always talking about, we are, or that we're not beautiful because of our lips. We wear big earrings, our nails, our hair, our bodies, but then other people profit off that same image that was, that continues to be demeaned and degraded.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in this film. They have these powers. And it's like, congrats. Want to, you can go back to the outskirts. We just need your powers for real quick so we can develop all this stuff. So
Right.
we're gonna capitalize again off of your difference while demeaning you, degrading you, and forcing you on the outlines, the outskirts or on the boundaries. So yeah.
And we saw that even that scientist that we learn as a scientist,
Yes.
how he, basically was manipulating her to try to get her to go back to this lab, whatever. Um, he essentially has followed her because of her seizures. People are able to zone in where she is and where she's located. So she's at this, cafe drinking coffee, and or eating breakfast or whatever. This guy
Mhm.
comes in, sparks up a conversation, and you're thinking, oh, maybe this scientist is this guy, because we don't know he's a scientist yet. this guy's just having a conversation with her. People do that.
Yeah.
So why would I think otherwise? And he gets her, buys her another cup of coffee. They have a conversation. They talk. You think nothing of it.
Mm-hmm.
So she get ready to leave, and she notices that there's a police officer watching or looking at the car that she has stolen.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, I can't go back to that car now because they're gonna know who I am. And you see the scientist say, "Oh, I'm over here, honey," and you're like, "Okay, so I thought you left." So this
Right.
is when the guy becomes suspicious because you're like, "You left," but
You
you
left.
actually didn't. So you're hanging around, and so she gets in the car, and they're driving like, no, whatever. And then that's when we realize this is not all that it's cracked up to be. This is
Right.
your escape. This
But
isn't
even she realized initially, like, I don't want to be all buddy buddy with you. You're weird.
right.
Like she catches on. We're like, girl, just let your guard down. You just ran away from water and you had an earthquake. Just it's okay. Just say hello. But she's like,
And she's always realizing, like, huh, I don't know about y'all. I don't know about you. There's something else. And so that's the intuition that she has. That even though she may be far out there, she may be going through some struggles, she's still clear-minded enough to know, yeah, this ain't all the way.
She was sober. She wasn't addicted this time. She was like,
Clear mind, sober, all, yeah.
Right. She was like, I know what you guys did to my family, so I'm just going to have my antenna up. But thank you for picking me up from the police officer, but I'm going to hurt you on my way out.
Right.
So
she's able to escape him, but then this is when we realize this is a scientist who's trying to take her in for testing to harness her power, harness her abilities, for not for her sake, not to make her feel better, but for how they can use it to benefit and gain money for their own,
right.
Own sake. So, we realize, okay, now we understand why she's running. Now we understand why she can't be in one place for too long, because they will come for her, literally. So, yeah, we see escapism happening in many different ways, in many different formats. Escaping is leaving those who are trying to kill you, leaving those who, escaping to see what's outside your four walls.
Right.
So
yeah. Yeah, like you said, just to know what's out there. Escaping your problem. Because she had a problem at home and she tried to escape, but she had to come back and deal with that, get to know herself.
Right.
So yeah, that.
So let's talk about, so we kind of have some understanding of the escape, and part of that escape is due to, addiction and mental health. So let's tap into a little bit of how this film kind of gives us another way to think about mental health, another way to think about addiction from this supernatural lens, from this, Black imaginary lens.
I appreciate that because we see Black women on TV who's addicted and they have this certain image of who they are. You're addicted because whatever, you're clothes, blah blah. But in this film, we see like she became addicted because she thought it could help.
Right.
She thought it could really help her seizures instead of like, I'm addicted, I like it or whatever. And yes, she was hanging with the wrong crowd, but again, while she was addicted, she still never had seizures. So it really gives us insight into what addiction is and why people resort to addiction or why addiction develops, I guess, because it's definitely an illness. And even seeing her coming off of addiction and saying it is possible, we all don't have to look raggedy like they keep depicting in these films.
Yes.
And so it was an insight into what does it mean to be a Black woman addicted, and how you can still look pretty and like put things together, and you can still be addicted to something. And so that was very interesting to me.
And she was still a human being.
Yes.
Even in the illness, even in the addiction, there, she's still a Black woman. She's still a human.
Yes.
So, like you said, there has been this representation of how addiction looks as it relates to Black women. Not just as far as how it looks to, but Black women specifically have been marked in a certain way, that this is what someone looks like who's addicted to drugs. And addiction comes in different many ways.
Yes.
All look the same.
Right.
And it's we all, there's all this a performance.
I mean, it really does even go back to this idea of, because she was outcasted due to her supernatural abilities, she tried to hide them with drugs. So it goes back to how the society make Black women vulnerable to these situations. Because she wasn't supported, even honestly, by her family at the time, because they didn't know how to deal with her. And so she was like, okay, well, I'm going to resort to drugs, and hopefully this will help me deal with anything I need to deal with. So yeah, that was very interesting. And so another important thing that I want to tap into is this idea of, what does it mean to be a superhero?
Yes.
And is she a superhero?
I guess that would depend on how we define what is a superhero. I like to think I have superhero abilities. I like to think that at times I could be a superhero. I have my moments. So yeah. What about you? Do you think you maybe have some superhero abilities and talents?
I know I have superhero. I'm a superhero, a superhero. I'm still here. To even still be here, yes. Yes. I have it. I have powers, of course. We all do. And I mean, because we're here. Despite it all, we're here. So yeah, absolutely. And I can see even in her case how she is a superhero, and how she harnesses her, especially at the end.
Right.
Because sometimes, Black women, we have power forever. We've been having power since, beginning of time.
Oh yeah.
But we never give ourselves credit for how great we are.
Right.
When she realized how great she is, she's able to change the earth.
Yes.
And it's like, literally, she's like, oh, I got this now. She goes back home. It's almost like with Sugar Avery. I was married now. She goes back home and she's like, I can see the colors.
Yes. And that's like this triumphant moment.
Now she left though. She had to come back. It was FYI. She was gone by the time. And she said, oh, they're there. Oh.
I think a moment that both you and I definitely can relate to this, like we made it, was like when we graduated with our PhDs. Like that moment we were like, we made it. Like we got through. We did it. Yes. Oh my God. I'm here. I'm still standing.
Still
I may be bruised, but I'm still standing.
I never said I wasn't hurt. But I'm just saying we are here. Okay. And it is like that, where you're like, we went somewhere to get our degree. We went away. And sometimes when we were away, we were like, we need to go back home to kind of get our mind back right. Because sometimes you forget yourself in your pursuits. So you sometimes come back home and be like, wait, this is who I am. And I can go back out. And then you find out, like, I got my degree. Well, you don't find out, you actually earned your degree. And you're like, woo! And so then you go back home and like, I got a degree. Like, so yeah, it's definitely like that.
Yeah.
It's definitely like that.
So I mean, that was a superpower in itself. Like we in a sense, we were wearing a cape.
Yes,
I often say, no, I don't wear a cape, but in that moment, we did have a cape, a literal cape. So then, we see that, superpowers can be your gifts, your talents, and in this case, particularly in Lila's case, this ability to use one's mind to disintegrate objects and then restore them, put them back together.
Right.
That's a powerful thing when a child. So we know, yes, the adults could do that, or they had that capability, but for a child to be able to take something apart and then put it back together, like, so what can you do in this world? Woo.
That was powerful, because at one time they made a quote like, if it's broken, it stays broken.
Yeah.
And the daughter's like, no, really, I break it and I can put it back together.
Right.
So something doesn't have to be broken forever.
It doesn't. And the fact that this child opens their eyes to that, like it's this new generation saying, no, I know that was broken then, and we tried to fix it, in this present, but in this future, this is what we're going to be able to do. This is how we what we are capable of, and that we're not just here on this earth to try and fix. No, we are going to fix it. We are going to put it back together.
And that is exactly what's happening now. Even when you think about police brutality and these issues of racism. And you know, at one point we were like, "Oh, these kids are always on social media. They need to get off social media. Oh, today just they can't survive without technology." But yet they have used their kids like Lila to push forward their agenda of we need to deal, or not just our agenda, of we need to deal with this racism, and we're going to connect to the world
Right.
using these very things that we were told were bad for us.
Yeah.
Using the very platforms that people say we were using too much. Oh, y'all on social media too much. You're doing too much on social media. Using that same platform saying we're going to connect to the world about what's going on here. And then develop a massive, we have hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
We have hashtag say her name. Hashtag now say his name and say their name. The fact that we're able to use the same thing that we were demonized for having and using too much to create and to, I guess, mandate. Well, I guess we're not creating it, but we're reforming police, using it to say this is not right. We're not standing for this anymore. And we have to also give credit to all the people who have done it before, using what they have generation to say, hey, we're gonna keep pushing, we're gonna keep pushing. And so you see the same with the new generation, using what they have to push, to further push the boundary. We're not taking it anymore. It isn't, it is what we never took it. I do want to make sure to emphasize, we never just took it. We were never passive people. We have with it accordingly each generation. And you see here a continuation of this resistance.
Right.
And that's what Lila is in this movie, this continuation of resistance. Both thought she was resisting to leaving and relocating. Lila thought she was resisting to addiction and then running away from home. Lila, well, no, Ruth thought she was resisting. Lila said, I'm going to put it back together with my powers.
Right, right. And so she's securing. So, you know, there's always this myth and fantasy and science fiction that Black people don't exist in the future. You know, there's always been this, like, you know, if you look at, you know, the early beginnings of science fiction and fantasy, you know, the existence of Black people was very much, and if we were there, it was very othered.
Yeah, it was
marginalized. But Lila is disrupting that myth and disrupting that notion and saying, not only have we been here, you know, then now we're going to continue to be here in the future. So you need to just get comfortable with my existence. You need to get comfortable with me being here because I'm not going anywhere.
Exactly.
You know, it's like I got tricks up my sleeve. So you thought that didn't work? I got something else. You know, we are resourceful people.
We are very resourceful. And again, just like we were saying with activism and resistance, even when you think of their powers, it never continues from the past. She got it from her great whoever. I don't know how to stop. We didn't get that information, but she got it from her own past. Just like we got our form of resistance from our ancestors, from our forebears, from our teachers who are telling us this is how we resist it. Now, how are you going to do it?
Right.
And you have a lot of like, I'm going to do this whole thing. Thank you guys. You passed, and you're doing it now, Lila. Thank you. I mean, Ruth, thank you. I'm going to show them how we can be futuristic in this because we're going to push past this moment. Thank you.
Yes. So then it brings the question of, can a gifted family of Black women save a parched world? Because if you remember, we mentioned about this, you know, lack of water.
Right.
So, you know, so in a way, you know, this movie is constantly, we're trying to quench the thirst. We're constantly trying to, you know, get that water that we so need. You know, because water is good for you, as Dr. Robson always tells me. You know, drink some water. Drink some water.
You got a headache? It's because you're thirsty. Just drink some water.
So to answer that, yes, a group of Black women, they can be gifted or not. Yes, they can save and have been saving this world from its being parched. And it could be parched in the literal sense, as how, you know, we're looking at in the movie, or we can think about this past election, how, you know, Black women, you know, basically saved.
Saved.
You know,
talk about that. Saved.
Black women basically said, you know what, you're gonna listen to us, like we doing something, and how Black women are continuing to make change. You know, just recently we saw how Boston elected a Black female for their mayor. Like these are things that were like, oh, y'all don't think we here? But let me show you. Let me put that
That's
out.
how we're here. Thank you.
Right, I'm here. So yes, Black women are continually
Mhm.
saying that even though you may want to take my gifts, you may want to take my talents, I got more. There's
Right.
so much more. Like you can take that one, but I got another one that's right under me. So
Yes.
um yet, as Malcolm X said, still remain the most disrespected group in the world.
Right.
You
She
know,
the fact is, let's go to the movie for that example of this. She brought rain to droughts, and they were still trying to get at them for like, but I still want to see your powers. You recognize and you appreciate our struggle and our strength, but then you constantly stop it from us or discredit us in
hmm
multiple ways. So yes, Malcolm X, exactly, still the most disrespected, have made strides even today
hmm
and still get shot in multiple situations. So yeah,
I mean, the fact that we still have to continuously bring up the conversation of Black women being disrespected, people are not listening to it. They're not listening. It's like you're not getting it. And people wonder why do we keep talking about, because people are not hearing the message.
right,
So until change happens, we're gonna have a movie like Fast Color to remind you that Black women are here, that Black women and girls are here, and what we bring to the table needs to be recognized and acknowledged, and not
right,
just in a way for commodification or for your own wealth, but for like their human existence,
right.
society. So
And it is important, like you said, we're here. We don't, a lot of times people render us invisible.
right.
Even not going back to the case of racism and police brutality, because that's the topic now. Even how we don't really talk about the Black women
Right.
who have been victims of police brutality and other racialized violence.
Yep.
And again, we should focus on everyone who are victims, but women for some reason tends to be hidden. Hence that's why Kimberly Crenshaw and the African American Policy Forum said we need to have hashtag say her name, but even then it got co-opted.
Right.
So we're here, we're suffering, but we're also triumphing, we're winning. See our victories instead of taking our victories
Right.
and say, hey, we are victorious together. See us, we're not a victor.
And in that, even, I always like to talk about, yes, even in the midst of trauma, there is a joy. So,
Yes,
granted, this film, it is shadowed by sadness. There is a lot of pain that is going through. We see this idea of a real life Black girl magic, you
yeah,
know, coming into play. I mean, the fact that we're celebrating, Black female power and
mhm,
the acknowledgement of such powers that they have, that this film is able to reimagine, um,
mhm.
the natural world beyond the lens of trauma. So it's like even with the trauma, we're able to kind of like push through that, open that up, push that, to the side and say, but here's where we exist. Here is how we are making changes.
Right. And
You may,
even
yeah.
no,
No,
you good. So this whole thing of I know it's like, but this whole thing of like even her, it's she may not understand, but she has the power to shake the earth.
yeah.
She has the power to move the world. And she's like, oh, I don't know what to do without. The thing is, we want to teach these Black women how to move the world or the benefit and the power of moving the world because we have moved the world. This election, Stacey Abrams, you had Black Voters Matter, of course, with you had a Black woman as a co-founder. You had hashtag Black Lives Matter, 3 Black co-founders. You have Vice President Kamala Harris. Like, we have moved the earth.
Right.
And sometimes even in this, we don't know our power.
Right.
And we think it's a flaw. Well, not because they won the game, but you see Black women, and that's one reason why I'm happy that Bo taught Lila.
Yes.
We have this power to move the world. Harness it, learn it, appreciate it, in spite of it all.
Yep. And as we go back to, this film and episode 7 of Lovecraft Country, there's just so much, in common here. And that moment when Hippolyta asked, or when Josephine Baker actually asked Hippolyta, like, what are you gonna do with that anger? You know, you got all you talking about all these things that you've seen and witnessed, and it's clear to you. So what you gonna do with it? And I feel like I see that in, you know, several of the moments in Fast Color where it's like, what are you gonna do once now that you've seen the Fast Color, now that you've seen the colors, what are you gonna do about it? What's gonna happen next? Because it's more than just seeing it. You now need to take the action. You need to push forward. So.
Oh, that's kind of like, that's exactly how we do with our PhD. Now you got it. Now what you gonna do for your community?
Yeah.
What you gonna do with your work?
And that's what we're constantly asking ourselves. Like, okay, what am I gonna do today with the work? What am I gonna do today in the classroom?
Right. Even what does it mean to be a Black scholar? We are innately scholar activists. Now that we are here and we have this power and we acknowledge our power and we understand our power, what do? Do you just sit on it? Nope. Or do you always use it? Like you said, in a classroom, outside the classroom, at a podcast, how do you use your work now that you've gotten this, now that you have the superpower?
Sorry, what's next? What's next? And in seeing that, so, and then what's next? So there is a topic that, a theme that comes up that doesn't really get talked about, I don't think enough. I think in small circles it does. And I'm learning a lot more about it as I have some friends who this is their work, this is their wheelhouse. But this idea of, you know, Black feminist ecologies, Black feminist environmental consciousness. And, you know, as someone who does identify as, you know, as a Black feminist, and, you know, and someone who appreciates what nature gives to us on a daily basis, you know, I start to think more about how those two work together.
Right.
So we're definitely seeing, you know, we kind of, or can kind of see this connection as far as to the environment and Black women, a connection of channeling such people like Zora Neale Hurston, Alice Walker, Jasmine Ward, a good scholar friend of mine, her name is Frances Roberts Gregory, and Dion Brand. These are Black female scholars who are working under the lens of like Black feminist ecologies and the ways in which Black women's connection to the environment is very much something that we need to, you know, consider and think about a lot more.
Because I think, you know, we racism, we look at it from a human perspective. But we have to understand that Black people have this connection to the environment. We are connected to the environment. White supremacy and this idea that, you know, white people or even people control nature. This symbiotic relationship is problematic. So, you know, you do see Black ecology coming forth in this film, where it's like we work in tandem. We work with each other. We work with just like with Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Are Watching God, how it was a hurricane that shook up her life. And she took control of this hurricane. And she became who she needed to become. We saw her strength. We saw her power. In Their Eyes Are Watching God, the main character, Janie.
There we go.
There you go, Janie. Okay. Yes, how Janie, you know, it was through this hurricane and the loss of her man at the time that she was like, this is who I am. You know, so again, you see, even through this natural disaster, she has always been strong, but you see more of her. It reveals her. In this movie, Fast Color, you see how Ruth is revealed through rain, her power and wielding rain. And again, you see our connection with nature, how we use nature with our strength. And you know, crazy, I guess not crazy, it reminds me of like my grandmother. She had a garden and how that was a primary way. I didn't learn how to garden. Like, that's not what I do, but that was her way of her connection with the earth, and also a way to feed us. So it was, you know, even in the midst of residential segregation, you know, food shortage, she had the earth to feed us. And so again, you see, even in this film and even other ways, we do need to focus on being able to bring in our conversations of racism, environmental justice.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think it's critical. I do think more information to be on that. Especially, we have this love-hate relationship with land. You know, we feel like slavery and, you know, our relationship with trees sometimes. But we need to deal with that. We need to talk about it, you know. But the fact that, you know, even going back to the example of my grandmother, we live off the land. The land yields us, like we are on land.
Mm-hmm.
There should be a conversation on Black ecology and how our powers work in tandem with that.
And I think it must be just a not even a southern thing, but just a black woman thing. Because my grandmother had a garden too.
Yes.
You know, I mean, this was the way to kind of like if you can't go to the store is in your backyard now. Like we don't need to, you know, worry about someone else giving us our nourishment and our substance. We can grow that. We can create that for ourselves. So yeah. Whew. So I'm also reminded too of this of a thought from a Black feminist ecologist. Her name is Carlin Ferrari, and how she mentions their stories have yet to be told and their environmental imaginaries have yet to be considered when thinking about Black women's connections, historical connections to the environment. That there's so many stories from our grandmothers, from our aunts, from our great grandmothers, from those our ancestors that came before us, who have that, you know, connection and that love for the land. It's what fed them. It's what kept them alive. You know, we have to have some level of restorative justice,
Right.
so as it relates to that. So
I really wish I had more of that understanding of it. But that's part of even being moved away from land,
yeah,
being in a city, in certain urban areas. You don't have that connection.
yep,
And even things like, what was it, poke salad? Have you heard of poke salad?
yeah, yeah,
And that if you cook it wrong, you'll die, but you have to cook it right. It's like that. That's like, I don't think I would ever learn that because it's highly dangerous and it's not really worth it at this point.
yeah.
But even that conversation of poke salad is historical and is directly tied to land where, yes, we know it could be very poisonous if you cook it wrong, but
Right.
it was a part of our sustenance.
Yep.
And we knew the land because we were the land. We tilled the land. We dealt with the land. And even before enslavement, even before enslavement, so I want, you know, make sure we make that clear too. Like enslavement didn't teach us anything new.
Right.
So even this conversation about land and how we fed off land, not only in regards to food nourishment, but even spiritual nourishment, how we sometimes need to go into nature just to find ourselves.
Right.
It's real. It's like, you know what, I just need to go outside. Even for vitamin D, we need to get some sun. So it's like how we are connected to this earth. And sometimes we focus only on us as just beings and beings,
Right.
but not the nature in which, you know, we are strongly connected with.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Some about, you know, it's something about the nature and being outside, being having the sun hitting your back, you know, seeing the rain. You know, I think some people we think we only like certain parts of the certain seasons, and for me, I'm like, you know, I'll take them all. Some a little bit less than others, and some I enjoy rainy days. They can be very
I love
relaxing.
rain.
They can be very comforting. You know, there's definitely several old wives' tales about like what's happening when it's raining and what's going on up
Yes,
above.
it's like
Below.
when it's thunder and lightning, God is talking, be quiet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you know,
And,
there's so much that
and
that
then also how our grandparents used to wash their hair in the rain.
oh yeah.
Even that, like, so many stories I forgot about. This is amazing.
Yeah. So the environment, you know, as much as we have to protect it, but we also have to kind of cultivate some of the stories that are connected to
Yeah.
what the environment gives to us on a regular, you know, basis. So
Yes.
woo, so
So,
I think we should, you know, let's think about some closing thoughts here.
yes, I do agree. Let's go to some closing thoughts.
This idea of Bo makes a statement of, you know, this idea of the promise that is this is only the beginning,
This is only the beginning.
and that, you know, so I think we can go back to your original question of like, so what were your thoughts first, and then what were your thoughts at the end? You know, so for me, at the end, you know, as much as I was like, this story definitely had a slower pace. It moved a little bit differently than I anticipated. It left me wanting more, but not in a bad way. I wanted to know what else can we do with this story? How do we continue the conversation that maybe the film didn't do? What the
Right.
film didn't do?
Right.
And that, you know,
Yeah.
I was definitely um, I don't know if convinced is the word, but I definitely appreciated that there was not this white male savior in the end, that it was definitely, a black woman who still carried it to the end. You know,
It tried it though. It almost.
it almost did.
Almost. I was like,
Almost did. And I
oh,
was a little scared for a second because I was like, ooh, ooh.
like if it happens, then we would not have talked about it on this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
But
like, oh, we're not going to participate in that.
but the fact that we start with hearing a black woman talk about what has happened in past generations, and how we see two generations carrying on that legacy, not just one but two.
Yes.
So yeah, we end and begin with the black female presence. And for me, that I think helped to kind of close out the movie, because it
Yes.
was, like I said, there was definitely moments where I was like, okay, where y'all taking us with this movie,
Right.
but it does, like I said, it leaves us, for me at least, wanting more, and how this conversation continues.
I think after watching this film and after discussing the film in this podcast, um, I'm I appreciate what it offered us.
Yeah.
You know, a discussion about powers. And it's good when we talk about the greatness of Black women. And, you know, we do this every episode, but, you know, coming off the fact that we were just talking about Lovecraft Country, the episodes of, you know, Hippolyta being great, and then Dee Dee finding herself, and, you know, the things of that nature, it felt good to really come back and say, look, y'all, we have power. We are great. So I think that's what I took away, especially, you know, even in this conversation, how we were talking about the earth and we brought up our grandmothers,
Right.
how we're acknowledging the women in our lives who use their power to help us grow.
Yep.
And so I appreciate that from this film, Fast Color.
And I think, just to go back to your point, it's a reminder, because we already knew we had a power. We already knew that. But it was just a reminder to say, okay, it's there. Just tap into it. Just nourish it a little bit more. Just harness it a little bit more. Just, don't be afraid to come back home to get help. Don't be afraid to go back to the beginning, so that you can see what you missed, what you need to add. If anything else, definitely the film, like I said, offers us an opportunity for that. So,
And, and I
yeah,
want to add to that. And also, it's important that we don't succumb to pressures to keep our powers hidden.
yes, yes,
Sometimes we have so many, we are so great that we're like, we can be too great because we don't want to come off like we're doing too much. So we hide. It's like, show who you are.
yep,
And don't shy away from it. We're
right.
sometimes taught to shy away from our greatness. So that was a great thing about this film as well.
So, and I'm glad we watched it. I'm glad we had the conversation. I hope that others, will maybe take something or get something else out of this film. As of right now, it's on Hulu, so definitely, check it out there. Like I said, there's many conversations to be had. So these are just some of the ones that we kind of thought of. But know that that's the great thing about you know films and movies and TV series. We can all bring something new to the discussion. So we hope that each of you all get something and bring something else out, and continue the conversation of
Yeah.
what this film starts.
And so I again, I had a great time. I'm sure Dr. Gibbs had a great time. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to our podcast. And I hope you take some understanding of Black women power with you as a result of this podcast and the understanding of that. One thing I want you to do is tune in with us next time. We're going to talk about Lovecraft episodes 9 and 10.
The ending. We coming to a close, y'all. We coming to a close.
When I tell you that it's going to be amazing, touching,
Yeah,
just be prepared. And I hope to see you then, or not necessarily see you, but I hope you support us then in the next episode.
absolutely. So remember, so the next time, remember, the past is a living thing, the present prepares for us, and the future is ours. See you guys next time.